Hello everyone. Today we're going to be talking about reforms and revolutions in the 1820s and 1830s. Remember, during this time period, Europeans like Metternich and other great powers of the time, they're trying to suppress or put down liberal and nationalistic ideas. Remember, we talked about this in terms of letting out steam. At this time, that they're trying to bottle up those ideas of nationalism and liberalism, and it's only a matter of time before those ideas or those people with those ideas try and fight back from their oppression. So today we're going to focus on several places, including Greece, Russia, Britain, Ireland, France, Belgium, and Poland, with their struggles at this time. The first country we'll talk about is the country of Greece. At this time, Greece was controlled by the Ottoman Empire. It's important to note that. And we're talking about the early 1820s. Remember, liberal and nationalistic ideas spread to Greece, as they did with many European countries at this time. They wanted independence from the Ottoman Empire, so the people of Greece revolted. Now, remember, we left off with the balance of power principle and the concert of Europe, which basically dictated that if any liberal or nationalistic revolutions erupted, Metternich and other countries would basically fight together to put those down. That doesn't happen within Greece. Remember, being controlled by the Ottoman Empire, primarily Muslims, they made an exception in this case, and they didn't help the Ottoman Empire. They let the Greek individuals, the Greek citizens, revolt, and they were successful. So by around 1830, Greece is a new independent country. We also see revolution emerge in Russia. This is known as the Decembrist Uprising of 1825. Remember, as Napoleon ripped through Europe from 1799 through 1814, and then a little bit into 1815, all those places that Napoleon went to were susceptible now to these new nationalistic and liberal ideas. Of course, Russia was not immune to these ideas as well. So Tsar Alexander I died, and there was a crisis as to who would take over. Now, Nicholas, he was the heir. He was the one who was given control of Russia by Alexander I. However, many favored Constantine. He was very popular at the time with the people. So a revolt ensued to place Constantine as the leader of Russia. Now, Nicholas I brutally puts down this rebellion. How does he handle it? He puts it down. He punishes the people who were guilty of this, of causing this drama within the country, and we should understand how this will shape his rule. Right from the get-go, he will be skeptical of these liberal or nationalistic ideas. He will try and root them out from the very beginning. And again, we're talking about Tsar Nicholas I with the Decembrist Uprising. This is one of our early uprisings within Russian history that will really challenge to see who the next leader of the country will be. We've had some in the past, but this was on a pretty large scale within Russia, definitely causing Nicholas I to step back and think how to prevent this in the future. The next country I'll talk about is the country of Great Britain. We've talked a lot about Britain over the past couple weeks. We know that Britain had these Corn Laws that were notorious with the people in Britain. Remember, the Corn Laws had a very positive impact on the landowning aristocrats. The Corn Laws essentially kept their corn prices high because it eliminated the opportunity for imported corn, grain, and things like that. So basically, the government had these laws in place to support that group of people. Remember, since the Industrial Revolution really emerged in Great Britain, we have these new factory owners, these new wealthy bourgeois class, who they're looking at these Corn Laws and they're saying the government is essentially keeping the landowning aristocrats in a power position. They don't believe it's fair. Remember, this group believes in free trade. They believe in some of those liberal tendencies, and they're very much against the Corn Laws at this time. We do have some battles that erupt in Britain. We don't have many. One is known as the Battle of Peterloo. St. Peter's Field in Manchester. Remember, Manchester is one of those places where we see a lot of industry pop up, and it's very difficult, impoverished conditions within Manchester. It started as a peaceful protest that had been savagely broken up by the cavalry of Britain, demonstrated the government's determination to keep that status quo intact. So that's a little bit about the Battle of Peterloo. But again, we don't see a major uprising within Britain. Part of this is because of this idea. The working class eventually won various reforms as a result of the wealthy aristocrats and the new emerging middle class, or these factory owners, struggling over rights and power. Both sought the working class for popular support. So we're going to see more people having the right to vote. As more people having the right to vote, these groups, they're basically fighting for the votes of those people. So you can say that the lower and the middle class, they rise up within Britain due to the competition between the landowning aristocrats and the new factory owners. And again, the Great Reform Bill of 1832 expanded the voting pool a little bit at this time. It's not universal suffrage, but it's definitely a step in the right direction for Britain to allow more people to vote. Another place that is struggling during this time period is Ireland. Ireland in the mid-1840s had their potato crop fail, causing widespread famine and loss of life. This was an extremely difficult time for the Irish people. The British, who have dominated Ireland for quite some time, they were extremely slow to respond, embracing some of the liberal tendencies of small government not providing necessary aid to the people, leaving the people essentially to, in many cases, starve and have a very difficult few years as that potato crop failed. The Great Famine definitely intensified anti-British feelings and promoted a sense of Irish nationalism. So we will continue to see issues between these groups of people over the next 50 to 100 years and even beyond that as they struggle to coexist. It just wouldn't feel natural to talk about revolutions and issues within a country without talking about France. France has its own share of issues in the 1820s and 1830s. Remember, we left off after the Congress of Vienna. We see Louis XVIII, brother of Louis XVI. He takes control. You can imagine if you were him and you know what happened to your brother, he's pretty much abiding by the expectations of the people who brought him back, not really creating waves, doing anything to cause much turmoil within France. But once he dies in 1824, we see his brother, Charles X, take over. You see some of his goals over here: lessen the influence of the middle class, limit the right to vote, put the clergy back in charge of education, public money used to pay nobles for the loss of their lands during the French Revolution. So we see some of his goals, and they're definitely against, some of the expectations of the people at the time. And then soon he passes something called the July Ordinances. With the July Ordinances, he dissolved the entire parliament, imposed strict censorship, changed the voting law so that the government in the future could be assured of a conservative victory. What Charles X is essentially doing is manipulating the government to ensure that his needs and the needs of the upper class will be met. We're talking about France. We know that the people of France are not going to sit by and just allow this to happen. To the barricades, Essentially, they barricade the streets of Paris, causing a lot of issues for the French government. This is also the time of Victor Hugo's Les Miserables, was basically from this time period within France. So what do we see happen? Charles X fled as revolution spirits were stirring. His cousin Louis Philippe accepted the constitutional charter of 1814. So again, we see another French king flee the throne. Louis Philippe is known as the Citizen King. He was definitely part of the bourgeois class. He was much more liberal, and because of that, his government ignored the needs and the demands of the workers in the cities. They were seen as another nuisance and source of possible disorder. July 1832, an uprising in Paris was put down by force, and 800 were killed or wounded. So again, we're seeing France really struggling with their identity at this time. Who's going to be in power and control, and how are they going to use that control? Certainly the French people have demonstrated over the past, if they perceive their rights and liberties are being taken away by a conservative or even a liberalistic ruler at this time, they are going to go to the streets and fight back. So Louis Philippe, he will have many issues within France at this time. A lot of the working class, they don't respect him. I believe there were multiple attempts at assassinating Louis Philippe because of some of his tendencies with ruling. So more issues plaguing France at this time. Another place having issues in the 1820s and 1830s was Belgium. Remember, many in Belgium were not happy after the Congress of Vienna of 1814 and 1815. Belgium was, in a sense, merged with the Netherlands. This was part of the balance of power principle, to have a bigger Belgium-Netherlands area to counter some of the power of the French and Prussians. Hey guys, go back to the Union of Utrecht, all the way back in the time of Philip II. Remember, people in the north in the Netherlands were they were Protestant, they were seafarers, traders. They had a different way of life, and in the south we see more Catholics and farmers, individual workers. So they had different ways of life, kind of like in the United States before our Civil War. The North and the South just had different ways of life and different perspectives. Remember, with the ideas of nationalism, at this time the Belgians wanted their own country back, so they fought back. And interestingly enough, they did win their independence. Russia was going to help kind of contain this revolution and keep the status quo intact, but because of the Decembrist uprising, they really didn't have the opportunity to assist and help out. And by the time they were finished with their Decembrist uprising, it was too late. Independence had already been gained, and the country of Belgium was reestablished at this time. The final place that we will talk about today is Poland. We understand that Poland has been carved up, dominated by whether it's Austria, Prussia, especially Russia in the recent past. The Polish were influenced by the Romantics, basically longing for their past, longing for nationalism and to have their own sovereign country back. Rumors reached Poland that Nicholas I was planning to use Polish troops to put down revolutions in France and Belgium. Russia has dominated Poland for a long time. Feelings of nationalism and liberalism began making more and more people restless. The Polish rebelled against the Russians. This prevented the Russians from putting down the Belgium Revolution. So a combination of the Decembrist uprising along with putting down Poland prevented the Russians from trying to contain the Belgium Revolution. The Polish really hoped that the British and the French would assist and come to their aid. Unfortunately for the Poles, they did not. The Poles were not entirely united in this struggle anyway. They had different groups that had different expectations of sovereignty and life after Russian oppression. Because of that division, that certainly helped Russia prevail and continue to dominate Poland at this time. So essentially, after reviewing all of these places in Europe at this time, what is the impact of revolutions and reforms in the 1820s and 1830s? I want to review several of these points with you. The first one, conservatives did not reverse all the reforms put in place by the French Revolution. The Carlsbad Decrees, some of the other expectations, the Holy Alliance, which was meant to root out ideas of liberalism and nationalism. That wasn't happening. These ideas were now becoming deeply rooted within European societies, and it was going to be difficult to root these out. Liberalism would challenge the conservative plan for European peace and law and order at this time. We also see, and this last point is pretty important, these revolutions left much unfinished and a seething, unsatisfied working class. That's the big picture. We have a lot of people in Europe who are still upset about the conditions left after Napoleon. We have a lot of people upset because of the Industrial Revolution. Having a society with very poor conditions and low pay, a lot of people are suffering at this time within Europe, and essentially people want change. And we know that these reforms and revolutions, we talked about just letting out steam, the importance of trying to kind of get back some of those rights and powers. This is just a little bit of letting out steam. The major revolutions, of course, come in 1848, where we see that explosion of steam trying to get released as the people demand and are willing to fight and die for their independence. So more to come with the revolutions of 1848. But again, this is just kind of a mini, a smaller way for the people to try and get their rights and liberties at this time. I hope this was helpful. Enjoy the rest of your day.